Hello everybody, thank you for tuning in to another video. A little bit different scenery this week. We're in my downtown Belleville Royal LePage office. This week's video is going to be on the Consumer Price Index numbers for September of 2023. If you don't know what Consumer Price Index or CPI is, it's what impacts inflation, and basically the headline inflation number is what the CPI number is. So this is what Bank of Canada makes a lot of its decisions on when they're looking to increase, decrease, hold rates. It is October 24th. We have a rate announcement tomorrow at 10 a.m. on October 25th. My expectation based on this data and other circumstances is that Bank of Canada will hold interest rates. So let's get into the data. And if you watch this video tomorrow, you can let me know if I'm right or wrong, if they're going to hold rates or not. Okay, let's get into the numbers. So Consumer Price Index on a year-over-year basis rose 3.8% this month, September 2022 to September 2023. That's down from 4.0% if we're looking at the August to August numbers from last month. Gasoline rose this month 7.5%, whereas last month, year over year, it rose 0.8%. So if we exclude gasoline from the basket of goods, we're at 3.7% increase this month compared to a 4.1% increase last month. We're seeing food prices still at an elevated level. Grocery prices across the board up 5.8% year over year in our September month versus 6.9% in August. So food prices still really elevated, but they're coming down more than 1% from August. So that's good to see. That's good for Bank of Canada to see, because that's a big stress on a lot of Canadians, is elevated food prices. Shelter still on par with August. We're at about 6% year over year increase. So inflation still running hot on shelter. And shelter, if you didn't know, is CPI's biggest contributor to their basket of goods. So we have elevated rent prices, we have higher mortgage prices, we have higher cost of borrowing. That's all going to push up the CPI on shelter, which is a bit of an oxymoron, because if we see bigger increases in shelter costs, we see higher inflation. And then, I've said this in other videos, Bank of Canada then says, oh, CPI's up, inflation's up, we better increase rates to curb this demand. But then they don't get that increasing rates is increasing shelter costs, which is the biggest contributor to the CPI basket of goods. So what do we do with all this consumer price index, inflation data? What does this all mean? And how does this factor into Bank of Canada's decision to hike, hold, or decrease rates? Well, I think it makes a pretty good case for Bank of Canada to hold rates. We see that discretionary spending definitely seems to be coming down. Really, the only elevated costs here we're seeing are groceries and shelter. And I mean, those are like necessities. So discretionary spending down, I think that is a good case to hold rates, right? Because we don't need to stop demand right now. I think most Canadians anyways are feeling this pressure on the economy. They're tightening their belts a little bit. We see airfares down over 20%. So definitely less demand for trips. I'm seeing in my business, like people who I interact with, contractors are less busy. And I have a good client runs a good contracting business. They're doing a lot less high-end renovations because people are realizing this doesn't add instant equity to their house or double the amount of the renovation cost, right? Or their cost of borrowing from their home equity line of credit is not 3% anymore, it's 9% now, and it doesn't make sense to do that renovation. So definitely curbing demand for this discretionary spending. And as I touched on before, a big part propping this CPI number up is shelter costs. So we have higher than ever rental rates in Canada. I know for myself, the rental market is crazy tight. Every rental I post for clients or for myself, getting so many inquiries. The prices are like through the roof for rentals. I don't know how low income people are even affording to rent places. We have mortgage costs higher. The home price to mortgage cost rate, it's the most expensive time to own real estate than it ever has been. So we're seeing really people getting squeezed on these shelter costs. Whereas if we look down south, even like my own example, rent prices there, I rented out a property for $1,200 2 years ago, and the rent is still $1,200. We have a new tenant going in. It took 3 months to find this tenant, and they're still paying $1,200. Whereas here, if I look at a rental that I own from 2 years ago, the rent prices increased like 30%, whereas there it's flat. So you're seeing a lot of places in the US like rents stabilizing, whereas here it's just running so hot because it's so elevated. We don't have enough housing here. And that's a problem because as rents creep higher or as rates get higher and people can't qualify, it puts so much pressure on the rental market that rents have no choice but to go up. And we're seeing that in mom and pop landlords and in big multifamily buildings. Rents continue to rise. So I know this is a lot of rambling and a lot of data, and for some people you might not care, but I think even with all this data put aside, you can see it in the community, in the economy. People are feeling something coming, right? Like there's been all these rate increases. There's some people who just feel like they're just holding on, right? Like rents have gone up so high that people are barely able to afford things. Like you can see that discretionary spending is definitely down. People are tightening their belt. They're a lot more tight with their money. They're being cautious and really thinking twice about what they're buying. So I think this makes a really strong case for Bank of Canada to hold rates tomorrow. But what do I know? I'm just a realtor here in Belleville that doesn't know anything. So hopefully you found this video informative. As always, feel free to contact me. All my info is in the description below. And thank you for watching. We'll have another video for you next week. Bank of Canada announcement tomorrow.